Hello, and welcome back to another session by Grey Beyond Narratives. Today's session is called Eclectic. It's a new show that explores a diverse range of thought provoking topics. In each episode, we journey through a tapestry of ideas touching upon science fiction wonderlands, spiritualism and cults, Woodstock's legacy, New Age novelties, mythological marvels, multicultural influences, Far Eastern practices, Kabbalah and Sufism, esoteric exploration. Today, our focus turns out to be iconic world of Star Wars in science fiction exploration. We're excited to introduce two new members to our team. Tatiana, who will be moderating. Tatiana joined us as a moderator, bringing her passion for diversity and exploration to enhance our discussion. And then we have Rafi Baig with us. He's an intellectual with experience in biochemical engineering and finances, and an avid Star Wars and Star Trek fan and science fiction enthusiast. Rafi is also a devoted Star Wars and science fiction fan, and is here to share his insight and enthusiasm. We have our old hosts with us, Furkan, Shaji, Sid, and of course me. And I'm going to move forward, and I would want Tatiana and Rafi Bai to say hello, introduce themselves. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tatiana Serian. Some people might know me from Clubhouse and moderating conversations on Afghanistan and Pakistan and the whole area during the U.S. Oh, I'm hearing okay feedback. During the U.S. abandonment of Afghanistan, and I'm an activist and an author, and I'm very excited to be here. Rafi Beg.
And
Rafi? Yeah, okay.
oh, hello. Yep, my name's Rafi. It's the first time actually doing anything like this, so this is a bit of a novel experience for me. I'm very impressed with the introduction I had. Thank you. So let's get on with this.
So yeah, I think I'll go straight to Maham. Maham, because you are also an enthusiast in terms of Star Wars. So just take the lead, please.
Yeah, so Star Wars, right? I personally feel I'm going to start with this side that I personally feel Star Wars is not just a collection of movies, science fiction movies. It has a lot of stuff going on. Like personally, I feel like Star Wars tell you story of every culture. Like if you put Star Wars on any country, and at some point in the Star Wars universe, you will find it relating, right? Put it anywhere, you will find some part of Star Wars related to our present situation in the world or in the past history, because George Lucas was a big history buff, so he made sure he take ideas from different historical events. So I guess initially how we're going to start this is that the origination of science fiction and what were the early influences. As far as I've
I,
read, I guess we have a lot of
I, If I may,
yeah.
I'm just curious. I'm sorry, Maham. I didn't mean to step on your words at all. I'm curious. Before we get into like the overall discussion, can we get maybe like 30 seconds to a minute from everybody of what your first experience of Star Wars was and what it catalyzed in you, like what your reaction to it was the first time you saw it? So I just want to understand like your personal connections, and the impact that it had on you, and then we can talk about larger impacts.
Yeah, I guess that we can totally do that.
So did you want to start, Maham? When you first saw Star Wars, what was your response to it? How did it make you feel?
I'm gonna be honest. The first when I first because by the time I was watching it, there was already the 90s version, the prelogue, and I had to start watch it chronologically. And initially, the first two movies, it was nice, but because I watched it with my family, I had to watch it. I had to complete the movie. They were kind of boring. Initially, I was not really that interested, but then later on, I started watching the Clone Wars. Out of curiosity. And that's what made me really interested. And then I started watching all kind of episodes of it. I started watching reading these comic books, and I kind of, after that, it's like history. I love the whole experience of it, and I started reading about it. There are times when in the middle of the night I'll be like, what was Mandalorian inspired of? And then I'll start googling that question, and I'll just read about it, what was Mandalorian inspired of. So yeah, that was my experience.
Okay, so it totally drew you in and you went all in once you got in. Got it. Who would like to go next? I think Steve, since you're unmuted, I think actually you're all unmuted, but since you're on camera and unmuted, would you like to tell us next? Um,
Sure. My, f- I was very young when I first saw Star Wars on Cartoon Network. Uh, so the memories are vivid in regards to when I first saw it. Uh, I do know that I saw the animated series before the actual movies. Uh, and To be honest, I always sided towards Star Trek because it was, uh, more systematic or episode driven, and Star Wars was, well, there were much better cartoons out there. Mm, But there are a lot of things, especially when it comes to the relationship between Anakin and his mentor. Maham, what was the name of his mentor? It's skipping my mind
Obi-Wan
right now.
Kenobi.
Obi
Obi-Wan
Wan.
Kenobi.
The relationship between Anakin and Obi Wan, that was something that I mostly focused on, uh, because there are very few fictional. There were very few fictional master and pupil relationships that were portrayed in such details. So that is what attracted me the most to Star Wars.
Lovely. Thank you, Sid. Um, Dr. Ahmed, would you like to share next?
Yeah, the first experience would have to be like I had a sort of a mask of Sith, the assassin, but and it was probably in high school, I guess. Yeah, somewhere around that time. Uh, but I had no clue about what Star Wars is. And then my brother basically started watching Star Wars and was a real enthusiast. And we used to play games in college, and it was interesting. But overall, I think I watched the first movie a few months back on Maham's recommendation, and I couldn't finish the first episode. So I'm still a bit unaware of the whole universe, but I know people who are huge fans of the franchise and they collect things, and I know it's crazy how these items can go up in market. So yeah, but I'm intrigued by the franchise and how well it did pretty much over the past, I guess, 5 decades almost. And the craziness is not going uh, down for some reason. So yeah, it like new cartoons are coming in here and there, and the younger generation is also getting hooked to the franchise in certain ways. So that is something that basically intrigues me. Uh, the sentiment towards the franchise, it's crazy.
I
Yeah.
see. Thank you. I would like to welcome the fabulous Aditya to the stage. It's so lovely to see you. Aditya, we're just going around and having a quick sort of sharing session about when we first experienced Star Wars and the impact that it had on us, or our incipient reaction to it was. And it's great to see you. Hi, would you like to share?
Thank you so much for having me here, and it's like, it's funny, and but I haven't seen Star Wars. Maham is a big fan of Star Wars series, by the way.
And Shachi, how about you? Because I know that Rafi Beg is quite the fan, so I want to end on his passion for it. How about yourself, love?
Yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, growing up, I was more of a fan when it came to He-Man, and then somebody bought me a action figure of somebody called Darth Vader. I think Star Wars was dead at that time, and then for years and years and years, it was all about Star Trek. So again, all of a sudden, I think it was in the early 2000s when the Star Wars movie came up. And it's ironic, the person who brought it to me was like Rafi Beg. And once I still remember him dragging me down to the cinema. He is somebody who usually does not watch movies. So that's how I came across Star Wars. And that was when I understood. And then it was everywhere. It became mainstream. Like earlier, I think we used to consider it to be a very geeky thing, which I'm sure Rafi Beg will not agree with, but that's what it was like. But then it became mainstream, and I saw everyone around us like just talk about Star Wars all the time. And now we've come to a situation where the tables have turned. I think as far as sci-fi, the whole genre is concerned, it's very interesting. Star Trek is now something of the past, and not many people like connect to it in that same way, apart from the conventions and stuff. And that's the new thing in our when I was kind of a child, and when we were growing up, it was all about Star Trek and not about Star Wars. So that was a quiet period for Star Wars. But Darth Vader rocks. That's one person, a character which I know about. But yeah.
Thank you, Shachi. And we finally come to you, Rafi Beg, who I know is very passionate about Star Wars. So please walk us through what your first experience with it was and your reactions.
Okay, there's a reason for my passion. Star Wars was originally made in 1977. I was 6 years old, and it was released here in the UK early 78. 7 years old, first time I'd ever been to a cinema. I begged my dad to take me. He did, and it blew my mind, along with pretty much every 5 to 10-year-old in the world who had that experience. And that's the reason we're so passionate about it. It's not because it's a great movie or a great genre or anything like that. It's because we were tiddlywinks, little kids, and it was revolutionary for its time. But it's the first experience that any of us ever had, and it's just been living with us ever since. So 3 years later, when Empire Strikes Back came out, I would have been 9, 10, and I was there at the premiere. 3 years after that, I was 13, I was there at the premiere of Return of the Jedi. It was promised that they would make the prequels. And about 17 years later, they did. And my generation were counting the days. That's the reason for our passion. But I repeat, Star Wars isn't classic sci-fi in that sense. It's better than that. It's just so much fun. And if you really want to understand Star Wars, you need to start with episode 4 in its original format before you go to episode 1 or episode 7 or whatever. You need to do it in the order in which it was filmed. That's when you really understand it.
I
Because
think we. Oh, sorry. Go on.
it's just that if you start it in the middle, or rather with episode 1, there's an awful lot you won't understand because that's explained in episode 4. But if you start with episode 4, the original one, there's nothing to explain. It literally starts from the beginning. It doesn't make any sense until you watch it that way. Then it makes sense. But to really enjoy it, you need to switch your brain off and just enjoy it. Because that's the secret of Star Wars. It's just so much fun.
You have the joy of, I feel like the 6-year-old boy who first saw it. I can feel it emanating.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing your impressions and your first experiences. I believe I didn't leave anyone out, right? We got everyone. So now to get into some of the more analytical questions around Star Wars. So origins of sci-fi, like how did science fiction overall as a genre originate, and what were its early influences? Who would like to take this question? Do we have a way of raising hands here, or we just sort of jump in?
I think we'll just like come in one by one, whoever has something to say. I think most of the speakers who are going to know about this more is going to be Rafi and Maham there, and then everyone else will pitch in.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'm
yeah,
actually quite interested in
Yes, I'll go.
Maham's take on this question.
So I
So
guess
if you
initially, if you would say, because before that, like that book Frankenstein. I forgot the woman who wrote it. I forgot her name.
Mary Shelley,
Mary Shelley, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So I think that would be the first science fiction thing that came, and it actually became very popular in its time. And but initially, I would say like we will go as far as going to Mesopotamia, right? And we will start with the Epic of Gilgamesh. I think that would be the first science fiction kind of a stuff because it would count. And then we have this 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then we always had these. There is this Arabic 1,001 Nights, almost the same thing. I think magic and science fiction goes hand in hand. So all of these epic tales and everything, they kind of adds into it, and I think that is where exactly it started. The Epic of Gilgamesh kind of human were always fascinated by stuff like these, and there were I think there are these stories. I forgot its name, something where this guy goes to the moon, and because at that time we didn't know what moon was like and all that. So for us, it was like completely. It was science fiction for that time, and initially, I guess that's when we started getting these TVs and everything. So initially, I guess. Well, I don't know about most of the initial science fiction movies, and I feel like they must be really, really bad. But as far as I've read, most of them were very dystopian and kind of not recommended for young children. So Star Wars come, and Star Wars is like the kind of a thing that teenagers can watch, small kids can watch. And I guess after that, it kind of got really light, and that's the main idea, I guess. So I would think that it goes way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Thank you for that, Maham. Rafi, did you want to feed in with your thoughts?
okay. Maham, I'm seriously impressed with that you went all the way back that far, because you're absolutely right. science fiction has been with us humans since the dawn of time. Magic is simply science you don't understand yet. So all of these legends and myths, from going back whenever, it's all science fiction. So whether it be the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the ancient Maya, their legends of the beings coming down from the stars and doing all sorts of stuff. Even the Egyptian myths and legends, the ancient Egyptian ones, same thing. So it's always been with us, but it's obviously evolved over time. Science fiction as we now know it, probably you can date that back to around about Copernicus and Galileo, when they convinced the world that the world was not flat as a pancake, it's actually round and spherical. Got burned at the stake for saying it, but that's where you start seeing stories of space and things like that. As for what we would now think about science fiction in terms of H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, Mary Shelley, 200 years old, was very popular, as you pointed out. She wasn't the first to write it, but she was one of the more successful ones for her time. But really, it was still relatively niche until the end of the Second World War. Once the space race started, there was this collective, in my view, realization around the world that if we can go out there, then whatever is out there can come here. And that's where it just exploded. And it became a global thing, which is what you have now. Initially, the first movies dating back from the 30s or so were, as you pointed out, pretty bad. But they all had a theme, and the theme was, oh, these nasty aliens are all out to get us and they're all going to invade. Which probably by about Star Wars time, 1970s, it kind of occurred to people that, look, if these aliens are so advanced, they want to conquer and enslave us, they would have done it a long time ago. So maybe they're not all bad. Hence you have the E.T. film. Nice, cuddly aliens who are all here to help us and guide us and show us that the world is such a nice place and the universe is friendly. And that's where you see the evolution coming now. Whereas it's not something to be scared of, it's something to be explored. But I'm actually quite impressed that you went that far back, because most people wouldn't have. Most people would say, oh no, science fiction started with the stuff in the 1950s after Yuri Gagarin was the first man in space. No, it started a lot earlier than that.
Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to share your thoughts?
Would E.T. count as like science fiction?
Yes.
Can I just add something to what Rafa and Maham said? Like,
Please.
it's very
Yeah.
interesting. And like, all this time I was thinking about like, human brain. Since like, we have gone back to a long time ago. So somebody like, I remember like, it's a saying that, human brain, it's not a like, logic making machine, but it's a pattern recognizing machine. So we create myths, we create, it doesn't have to be correct, the first, like the last statement Raphael made, we did not reach to the moon, in like whatever 1967 or whatever, or it was, I guess it was 1969, but we already started thinking about it, a long time ago. So first you need a theory, then you need, then you come up with ideas, people, humans saw birds flying. It's how humans learned that, even humans can fly. Somebody even thought about it. So then you start, just keep on adding, more and more material to those thoughts. So that's thing. I think it's a essential part, or it's all what, differentiates humans from other animals. That's my understanding.
Thank you for that insight, Aditya. Would anyone else like to address this question? No pressure because there's lots more, but I just want to give everyone a chance. Okay. Um, so the next thing we wanted to explore was sort of why George Lucas created this universe, the Star Wars, and what cultural influences that he was subjected to at the time helped shape its narrative.
I guess I'll go first again. So, like I said, George Lucas wanted to make something for the teenagers because at that time, most of the science fiction were very dark movies, And when it comes to the influence on Star Wars universe, it's a huge list, right? Like I think George Lucas had something against Richard Nixon, so he in most of his movies, the villains are mostly inspired by him. There's even this dialogue in his movie called um, THX 1138. There he even copies this certain dialogue of Richard Nixon, and the villain is also inspired by him. Palpatine in Star Wars universe is also inspired from Richard Nixon, and how and the whole idea was inspired by the fact that how the how can a democracy, because the galactic republic is a democracy, how it can turn into a dictatorship, because according to him it kind of did turn into dictatorship. Then there is this inspiration from Vietnam War, like the Ewoks were inspired by the Vietnam Kongs, and there is this Celtic, Nordic, Viking inspiration for the Mandalorians. Personally, I feel that Mandalorians has a lot of resemblance with the Pashtun cultures, but that's personal opinion. And there is this. Oh yeah, the Nazis. Yeah, so the whole empire concept. He even copied the concept of the stormtrooper from the Nazis, and because we have stormtroopers in Star Wars as well, and the whole uniform. If you see the uniform of the generals in Star Wars, it's very inspired from the Nazis, and the whole process of Palpatine becoming from going from chancellor to the emperor is also inspired by the whole Hitler, going up the level. And there is this look of Richard Nixon and Hitler in Palpatine. It's like a mixture of character, but then there's so much. I mean, if you read on it, there is so much inspiration from different kind of stuff. Because, like I said, George Lucas was a history buff, so he would read stuff and then he would pick those stuff and make it a part of Star Wars. That's why I feel like when you watch Star Wars, you can relate it to any culture, like any place, any country you go to. You can just pick a certain story that is going on in Star Wars and relate it to them, because it is technically inspired from real life history. There is this book called Star Wars and History, where he have actually narrated where he have inspired most of the stuff, but it's a long list. So yeah, that's all I know.
This is such fascinating context. It's making me want to go back and rewatch it after this talk because I'll have so much more depth and richness. Thank you, Maham. So Does anyone else have any thoughts to share on why Lucas created Star Wars and cultural
Uh,
narratives and influences? Oh, what a surprise, Rafi. Yes, please,
yeah, I
by all
do,
means.
but I think I prefer to go last on this simply because I have a little bit more of a cynical take. So, um, so if anyone else wants to jump in first, that would be better.
I would like to say a little bit of a words. First of all, uh, I googled the picture of Palpatine and recognized him after Muhammad. Palpatine was inspired by him. He does look a little bit like him. So yeah, that's all that I had to take about it. And in regards to the cultural influence that Star Wars had, it made dreamers. Uh, Now, whether it's a good thing or not, me being, uh, you know what they say, hindsight is 2020. The biggest influence that Star Wars had on majority of the teenagers is that it made dreamers, and I don't know how to take that because a lot of us, especially my age group, we dreamt and we believed and we went into the fray believing that just like Obi-Wan, you have to just believe in yourself and jump in. At least I was not ready to know that just like Obi-Wan, you're gonna die. Uh, we can question whether or not Obi-Wan uh, gained what he was looking for or not. Was that a good ending or not? But in
Sorry,
the real life,
one moment. There's some background noise coming through. I don't know if that. Oh, that's your other mic. I understand. Sorry, go on.
uh,
Please continue. I thought
yeah,
it was somebody
yeah,
else who
that
needed to mute. My bad.
yeah, that is corrected. But yeah, now I don't particularly know the how would I judge the effects that it had on my generation. And Star Wars was not the only one. There was Pokemon. There was uh, Pokemon, and
I think you might be addressing an upcoming question, though, because we're just talking about influences on Lucas, and we're going to
ah,
get into how it impacted culture. But right now, this is more about how it impacted the creator, like how the culture around him impacted him in
oh,
and fed his creation.
oh, in that case, I think Maham summed it up pretty nicely. He's just hated Nixon, and in uh, uh, the most furious way, he said, "You know what? How I'm going to diss you? I'm going to make a whole goddamn universe on you, and you'll be the villain. And then I'm going to have a movie made about it, and then I'm going to make that villain look like you. So that's a double whammy on you, sir."
And I'm
So
going to
that's
ensure it's
my
a
take.
classic so no one ever forgets how terrible you are. You'll be immortalized forever as a villain. All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to
Okay.
share their
Yeah, yeah.
thoughts
So
before? Yes, Shaji,
I
go right ahead.
think what I'm about to say might not be popular opinion, but if you look at what occurred in the 60s with Timothy Leary and Woodstock and everything else, as a result of that, Lucas is also somebody who's widely known to be part and parcel of those circles, even though he had nothing to do with the drug culture, LSD, or mushrooms itself. So he did not turn on, tune in, and drop out like exactly. But there was a lot of influences in terms of how the story came out, by whom it was perceived, and all those things were there. Where one of the common themes in those times in the creative departments, if you read up on those, was that they hated authority. Whether it was the music culture, whether it was sci-fi, it was arts, culture of any form, uh, even tech. Like if you look at early advocates, like even Bill Gates, even though he looks like a complete nerd right now, or even Steve Jobs, I wouldn't classify him as a nerd. But even these people who then created all these or were involved in tech were all kind of influenced by those things. And what you can see as a common theme in whether they were running companies, whether they were writing stories, whether they were doing anything. It was against authoritative figures, and politicians were a prime example of those things. So I think it had a lot to do with the urban culture, which was growing at that time, and the way the urban culture was being curtailed at that time with the whole kind of a situation. I think that's why these things first made root into these creative arenas, and it was a way of expression. Because they couldn't directly do it, so it was through movies, it was through comics, it was through songs, it was through various forms of protesting and stuff. People wanted their words out, and Lucas was no different. And that's where it, I think, came from. That's just an opinion.
Tatiana, you're on mute.
I just realized that I was asking everybody to mute in the chat because of background noise, and I muted myself so that the typing didn't come through. I was just saying that thank you for that, Shaja. You've always been good for the stellar, unusual takes. So thank you. I believe, Rafi, we have come to you. What would you like to share?
Okay, as I said before, I have a bit of a more cynical take, but in my defense, it's because I've seen a number of interviews with George Lucas, so I have some reason to have a bit more of a cynical take. Originally, Star Trek was made by George Lucas because he received a sum of money from a studio to make a great film for kids, and he came up with Star Wars. It happened to be a worldwide phenomenon. Who knew? He certainly didn't. And he was given another sum of money to say, right, can you make a sequel? So he did. But he expanded it. And then he ended up making the third one, which he expanded even more and ended up completing the story. And it just took off from there. Originally, it was just supposed to be the one-off Star Wars, but it was so popular that he built on it. As for what inspired him, what Maham said is correct, but he actually based the story on a kind of mix of two very cult Japanese movies of the 1940s, 50s, 60s. The Hidden Fortress mainly, and also The Seven Samurai, which is where you get the concept of the Jedi from the samurai. And the actual thing about Palpatine rising up, basically a warlord rising up and conquering the place and becoming essentially the emperor, is from the Hidden Fortress. A warlord becomes shogun and then effectively rules all of Japan. He kind of adapted that into Star Wars. So that's where the story comes from, although he set it in space. But as I said, originally it was supposed to be a one-off. But because it was so popular, he just built on it. And as he built on it, then, yeah, absolutely, as Maham said, he essentially based Palpatine on Nixon. Because, like most people of his generation, he really didn't like Nixon. Pretty much no one did, certainly by then. And all of these other themes, the theme about the stormtroopers all being based around the Nazis, well, that's classic Hollywood stuff. Good guys, bad guys. Well, certainly in the 1970s, the worst possible guys were Nazis. So if you want to play a bad guy, make them a Nazi. So that's where that comes from. Also, the uniforms look good. So that's visually very appealing. As for the good guys, well, who were they based on? In the late 1970s, early 1980s, In America, the good guys were the Afghan Mujahideen. They're based around that, the rebels, the rebel alliance. Again, it's all about good guys, bad guys, good guys eventually winning after taking a bit of a beating. But yeah, all of these influences are there, but they kind of were added on later on to build the story as the story progressed. But it is interesting how it's actually influenced others more than George Lucas himself. But I think we'll get to that later.
Lovely, thank you. I noticed that we have a Dr. Goof who has joined.
I would, before I miss out on this, I would like to add on to Rafi. I just
Please.
remembered. Okay, so the Jedi, like Rafi said, they were inspired from samurai and Seven Samurai. You're correct. I entirely forgot about that. And they were also inspired by the Knight Templars. Like the Knight
Yes.
Templar had these 7 seats in their, the top tier, and how they used to live in poverty and, keeping everyone safe, and then how they were executed by the French King Philip something, yeah. And that's exactly, when the Jedi purge happened.
Yeah, the Jedi Order was based around the structure of the Knights Templar, yes.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah,
then the
absolutely.
Death Star was inspired a lot from the nuclear weapon, because how Death Star is called the weapon of mass
Yeah.
destruction. The same way, nuclear weapon have the same thing. But the rebels, I would say it was a lot inspired from Vietnam and the Afghan Mujahideen. But I think the exact Ewok character were inspired by the Vietnamese. But it was a mixture of a lot of cultures that it's just so hard to keep track of. I
Yeah.
personally feel that, I would say it again, I personally feel the Mandalorian was, they just tell so much story of the Pashtun culture. Like it relates so much. And I've told Shaji this like 100 times.
Thank you for that, Maham. And I'm wondering, we have a Dr. Goof who has joined us. Would you like to join in on this part of the conversation or introduce yourself? Say why you're here.
Hi, so this is Dr. Goof. So I joined in the middle of it, so I don't really know the entire discussion, but I do think that I'm somewhat inclined to agree with Rafi that it started as a one-off. It was supposed to be just one episode, just the Star Wars, and then it took off, so it became a whole big thing. But when I look at the Jedi, uh, if you watch episode 4, you take them as the good people, the light side. But if you watch more and more of Star Wars, uh, especially the Clone Wars animated series, you tend to see that, well, they are too restricted, too limited, and they might have it all wrong. So that kind of portrays that this is some kind of a religious organization that it is based on, the Jedi. So those are my
Interesting.
2 cents.
Interesting theory. Thank you for that. Okay, so um, in comparison to other series that exist, how would you say that Star Wars compares to, like, Dune and Star Trek, or like Lost in Space, or one of the ones that I love, Battlestar Galactica? What, in terms of like its themes, its impact, its uniqueness, how would you quantify what sets Star Wars apart, or what similarities exist? Dr. Ahmed, we haven't heard from you. Would you like to share your thoughts? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to make sure everyone is
Like
participating.
Tatiana, I just said that I don't know much about Star Wars. I just went through half of episode 1, and I'm like, I can't go through this. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not able to add much to the discussion today, to be
Can
honest.
I ask you a
Yes.
question, Dr. Furkan? Like that can be a very interesting take. Sorry, Tatiana,
Mhm.
Not at
old
all. Go
habits
ahead.
don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
I always
we
have a
flow
habit
well.
of
We flow well with this. It's
cutting you off.
fine.
Sorry about that. Okay, so why did that never intrigue you? Because like for example, in my case, when for example, Rafi took me to the cinema, even after watching that, it was not something which intrigued me so much, and the reason behind that was that the kind of association I had with those action figures, and like watching Star Trek for years and Star Wars not being part and parcel of that. I don't know. For some reason, I never got into it in that exact way either. What was your reasons for not going into it? Because it was all the rage in recent times, right?
I think I never hung out with the geeky crowd, I guess. I was more into like going out and doing stuff. I don't know, but I never like got hooked to Star Wars. Even though my younger brother was, and he also like Maham uh, uh, tried to sort of ask me to watch these episodes, go read on certain blogs and stuff, but I don't know, never intrigued me. It was like something I couldn't relate to. As I always say, I relate more to the Marvel universe or the DC comics. It's not Star Wars that I related to for some odd reason.
Just a
But
rhetoric question, and that's not geeky, sir.
no, it's cool.
I mean, Marvels is not geeky. Come on,
No,
bro.
not really.
Tatiana, back to you.
Yeah, I would like to add one thing. Like Marvel universe is way cooler than Star Wars. I know a lot of people would hate me on the panel and probably the audience as well, but Marvel universe is way cooler than Star Wars. Period.
I have a hot take on this.
Please go on.
I disagree.
You disagree, but I have a hot take. The thing is, the people, and you heard me when I was discussing that the whole effect on the generation thing, and we were dreamers and whatnot. The people who would like Star Trek and Star Wars and sci-fi novellas and series like that, we were the people who had to fight a bit more. We were the people who dreamt and fight and kept on fighting until our teenagers were gone, and we were. It doesn't end pretty, just like Anakin. It doesn't end pretty. But with Marvel, you have a start of an episode, and by the end of that episode, the good guys win. That doesn't happen with us. Our episode kept on going and going, and we were like, the victory is just at arm's length. You just have to push a little bit more. You just belt up, chin up, keep on fighting, and it's 2023, and we didn't win anything. Anakin died as Vader. We lived long enough to become villains.
Oh.
That's why he
I
likes.
would like to add on what Sid just said. The thing about Marvel and DC is everything is so black and white. You can't relate to it. It's just black and white. The good guys are too good. The good guys are doing everything right. That's not the case with Star Wars. Like the Galactic Republic. The reason there was a separatist movement because they thought the Galactic Republic was corrupt, and that is somehow true because there is a slavery business going on Tatooine. That I forgot the name, but anyway. So it relates a lot to real
Tatooine.
life. Tatooine, yes. Thank you for correcting me. It is a lot about real life because you see real life people that they're not black and white. They're in a very gray situation, and then they sometimes fall into the black, sometimes they fall into the white, and everybody have their vices, of course, other than Obi-Wan. Even he had some stuff going on, but yeah, I guess that's the thing, you can relate to it. It's more, even though it's in some other universe, in some other galaxy, but you can still relate to it. But
So
then
what
there
I'm
is Marvel, right? A man throwing spider webs from his hand and with no possible sense, right, for Kalbai.
so what I'm
I
hearing
just,
is uh
uh,
I
yeah,
was just wanting to sum up what was being said, and I'll let you jump in just a second. I'm hearing that like there's more sort of complexity and shades of gray that are easier to relate to as part of the human experience versus this very sort of, and what we are encouraged not to do, right, is to have black and white thinking, but this very black and white, all good, all bad, because no human is that. We are all, shades of gray. And so that's interesting. Sid, sorry, please go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted the panel to categorically note this. I am personally offended when Maham said galaxy and did not add far, far away. That was a crime for a Star Wars fan.
Noted. Duly noted.
I'd like
Just
to
to add a
even
bit,
like pose in. Don't you think Marvels and Star Wars are basically different genres slightly altogether? Marvels is more superhero, and like for example, if we're going to talk about sci-fi in particular, then you'll have to talk about Star Trek in comparison, or The Origin, a really shitty thing we want to use to watch reruns of Americans and like their shows. I'm sorry, Tatiana, but that's just a fact.
It's okay.
Like Lost in Space. I mean, what kind of cardboard boxes were they like basically showing in that movie? But again, Lost in Space, I think, was created in the 50s or the 60s. I'm not sure, but the reruns and everything that was always on in the UK for some reason, as was Star Trek and Star Wars. But again, I would say slightly different genre, and I think superheroes. You just have to look at the genres and like the backgrounds of the fan following of majority of these movies, and you can basically decide and see what kind of people are following what. And I think slightly what you'll see is uh, superhero kind of fan base is like for Marvel, Superman, Spider-Man, Batman. It's slightly different to what would be compared in exact hardcore sci-fi. So I think that's something to expand on.
Indeed.
I would also like to add the Space Odyssey to the list of science fiction, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
one of
2001: A Space Odyssey. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Yeah, yeah.
the best
interestingly,
science fiction movie ever.
as the facilitator,
I
I
know.
generally don't want to insert my opinion and I want to stay out of things, but something you've all said sparked something I'd read about when there are times of socioeconomic depression or like war or increasing fascism in a government, people tend to be attracted more to themes that capture what they're feeling in a metaphorical way. So, for example, stories about vampires get really popular, or werewolves, or things like that. So, it makes sense that, being a person of his time and introducing the cultural narratives that he did and repackaging them, that people resonated with what they saw because it, on some level, was metaphorical for the struggles that they were feeling. Anyway, sorry, I will go back to facilitating now. So, uh, Rafi, did you share your thoughts on how, because you were, before we started this, for background for everyone who was not here, before we started the podcast, Rafi made a very interesting comment about how Star Wars isn't really sci-fi. And I feel like just, pearls got clutched across the internet, but that it isn't really sci-fi, but it's actually steampunk and beautifully done, but steampunk. So can you please s- flesh out for us what you mean by that and why you classify it as such?
Because that originally, from George Lucas's own words, is what he intended to do. He intended to make essentially a soap opera kind of movie in a science fiction kind of setting and just make it a lot of fun. All of these things that the other contributors are saying about how the various levels of you can go into with Star Wars. Yes, that's true, eventually. But when you start off with the first one that was ever made, namely Episode 4, A New Hope, it is very black and white. There's very little shades of grey in that. It's all about good guys, bad guys. It's only as it progresses, as the other films are being made, that it becomes more complex and more web-like. And then you start seeing the characters really develop. Which is why I said right at the beginning, if you really want to understand Star Wars, watch it in the order it was made. Because Episode 4, A New Hope, the original, is so easy to understand. It's literally almost like a Marvel movie. It's good guys, bad guys, good guys win. End of story. And it's just so much fun. But from there, it will help you understand as you go on. Dr. Ahmed said that he couldn't really get into it. But then you started with Episode 1, A Phantom Menace. Yeah, you wouldn't understand Star Wars if you start there. You need to start with Episode 4. Switch your brain off and just enjoy it. Then as you progress, then you will understand it. And then you'll be addicted to it because it is so much fun.
Actually, I have.
Yes, Mom, go ahead.
I have. There's something I'm going to disagree with Rafi on. I don't think the first few episodes were entirely black and white because Darth Vader is the bad guy and then he becomes a good guy and he is the reason Palpatine is dead. Not exactly dead because they had to revive him for no reason again, but that counts as
That's true. That's true, but it's only he becomes a good guy in the end Return of the Jedi, which was 6 years later after the first one was made. For the first...
Oh, you're just talking about the first movie.
Right.
Agree.
Because originally it was supposed to be just Star Wars: A New Hope. The other movies were never supposed to be made. So if you just watch it in its isolation.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm
just glad it went on and still going on.
Watch it in isolation, and then it's very black and white. It's a lot of fun, and it's very much like a Marvel movie.
I have a question from both of you. So my question is, do you think they turned Darth Vader into a more of a protagonist character because of his popularity or change in script? That they just wanted to change it. Why was he turned around? Or were they basically, if there was more to it, that they were basically showing that people can have various backgrounds, they can change, and nothing is like black and white? What was the mindset behind it? Commercial value or scriptural value?
Both. Darth Vader from the original movies is one of the most popular characters. In many respects, he was more popular as a character than almost anyone else, except Yoda. Yoda was always the most popular character. But I remember from my school days, where I was like 7, 8, 9, you play Star Wars in the playground, everyone wanted to be Darth Vader. No one wanted to be Obi-Wan. No one wanted to be Luke Skywalker. Everyone wanted to be Darth Vader. It's something to do with the breathing. I have no idea. So when they decided to make more movies, to make it commercially successful, Well, let's fill out Darth Vader's backstory. So, yes, it was commercial, but it was also a very good move because everyone wanted to know more about Darth Vader. So that's where is Anakin's story, is Phantom Menace and the other two, the ones that were made in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's Anakin's story. The first three, episodes 4, 5, and 6, they're Luke's story. And then the last three are the essentially the completion, which is actually more Palpatine's story than anyone else, strangely enough. It's like, who is Palpatine? What's all this Sith stuff about? And that's where it's completed, supposedly. But as usual, Hollywood has left an open ending.
Yeah. To
Just in
keep
case.
people fighting forever about it. Yeah. I think
Um,
there is, I'll come to you 1 second. I think there is something to be said for how people tend to find villains more complex and interesting than good guys. And in some ways relate because they know that they're not perfect, and the good character can seem like too much to aspire to. And also in some ways aspire to be as free to be as villainous as the villain. So there can be a lot of like superimposition and projection onto those characters. Like, what's their origin story? How do they turn out like this? They're just fascinating by nature. Sorry, Maham, please.
I just wanted to tell Rafi that if you don't know this, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, she will be directing the new Star Wars movie, and it is still about uh, Rey Skywalker. So I really don't understand if it's about the Palpatine story going on, and it's now again started the Skywalker story. But according to those movies, I guess she'll be starting a new Jedi Order. But yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
story haven't
yeah,
exactly ended.
yeah. The reason why I say this, that the first three are Luke's story.
Yeah.
It's supposedly about Luke Skywalker and who Luke Skywalker was and is. Then you have Anakin's story, which is the backstory. It's like, where did Luke come from? What's Luke's purpose? Well, that you need to know about Anakin Skywalker. The last three is about Palpatine because it completes Palpatine's story. Up until then, you knew who Palpatine was, but you didn't know much about him.
But
The
I
last
mean,
three, you figure out exactly what the Sith are and who Palpatine was. Assuming you've never read any of the fan books or anything like that.
I have read some of the comics, and this one book about Darth Vader, and during when he met Luke Skywalker. So I guess that's a fan book. But I think, well, I mean, yes, this is a very popular opinion. The last three movies, well, even if they were about Palpatine, they were technically, I mean, as a Star Wars fan, I love it, but when I think about the story, they kind of destroyed the whole purpose of it. Like, Anakin was supposed to be the chosen one. I mean, why would you bring Palpatine back again? I mean, you could just introduce another villain, use that guy, that blue guy in the Star Wars Rebels. I think he was part of this Ashoka series
Tron.
right now. Huh?
Tron?
Tron, yeah. Tron. Yes, they could have just used him as a new villain, without, keep Palpatine killed, but use him as trying to drive the Empire. But yeah, the whole Lucas film went into the hands of Disney, and I'm gonna be honest, they kind of did destroy it. But I love it. I love them so much. I'll watch them anyway.
Yeah,
Originally, the plan
you're right.
for
You're
episode
right.
789 was to be story of Luke Skywalker again. It was not supposed to be Palpatine or Ray Palpatine slash Skywalker, nobody. But they ended up changing it when Lucas sold it off. So there's that.
I know we have like lots of different themes and dynamics and facets of this to explore, but I really want to just drill down for a second into what Rafi had said, because I think the audience might need a little bit more clarity. I think I want a little more clarity as well. Of how do you disambiguate what makes Star Wars steampunk? Because you said because it's like soap operatic, right? But
Mhm.
I mean, Dune, you could say the same thing about. So what disambiguates Dune as being wholly in the realm of sci-fi and separates Star Wars out to where it's transcending into something else?
Okay. Again, this is a personal opinion on this, but classic sci-fi
Hmm.
is about taking an issue or issues of the day and putting them either onto paper or on screen in a way that is acceptable. Because a lot of the issues that sci-fi deals with, really good sci-fi, if you present them in a more contemporary setting, will offend an awful lot of people. They can be very controversial. But some reason, put it in a science fiction setting, either in the future or a galaxy far, far away or a dystopian parallel world, audiences accept it. They don't become so irate or angry. As a result, your message can get across. When Dune was originally written, it was written for a purpose. He wanted to put out there some various social issues that he thought were very, very important, like the nature of economics, the nature of what it means to be free or what it means to be enslaved, and various other things. But it was a deliberate, intentional thing with Dune and with most classic sci-fi. The reason why I say that Star Wars originally wasn't meant to be sci-fi in that classic sense, it's just steampunk, because that was never George Lucas's original intention. His original intention was just to make a really good space romp that everyone will enjoy. The whole family can just really love it, which he succeeded. But because he succeeded so well and ended up being able to make so more of them, it evolved into sci-fi, what I would call more classic type of sci-fi. He started throwing some issues and social stuff into it as well that originally wasn't meant to be there because he didn't have time. He only had, 2 hours in the first movie. But eventually, now you have 9 films, then you can explore issues. The Dune books, if you've ever read them or even seen them, they're huge. Each one of them, they're massive. And as a result, there's so much space and time to just explore various issues of what it means to be human, what it means to be free, what it means, meaning of life stuff. That's classic sci-fi. Same with H.G. Wells when he wrote The Time Machine back in the 19th century. He's talking about issues involving slavery, issues involving gender in a very socially acceptable way, or at least acceptable at that time. If you try to put it in a more contemporary setting, he'd probably be prosecuted back in the 19th century. But by doing it the way he did, it was very acceptable. That's classic sci-fi. Address an issue in an acceptable way so your message gets across. That's not what Star Wars originally was, but it's supposed to become that now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for illuminating that with such clarity, because now I understand with crystalline perfection the distinction that you're making, and I see your point that it wasn't intended to be social commentary,
No.
but it might have morphed into that. Thank you for that. For that view on it. So, moving on to like impact on society. In what ways has Star Wars become a global cultural phenomenon, and what impacts has it had on society?
If I
Not,
may,
not
like,
everyone at once. Yes, go ahead, Sid.
yeah, like someone just mentioned, like every kid in high school or school, whatever was being talked about, wanted to be Darth Vader. That's not a really good impact on society, I would say. Like these days, it is becoming a bit more being uh, politically correct, not putting in bad examples for kids. So I don't know how it was used to be, but right now, if someone is like getting fascinated by a dark character, it's a bit of a problem for parents, I would say.
It is now, but remember, I'm talking about 1978, 79. Back then, it was a little bit different. It was very much good guys, bad guys, cops and robbers. You know, and being Darth Vader was really cool, and it was perfectly
If you look
acceptable
at
back then.
if you look at even today, like the most prominent dialogue from Star Wars is "Come to the dark side," right? That's Darth Vader.
No,
I
the
think
most prominent dialogue.
merchandise-wise,
The
Darth
most
Vader
prominent
is.
dialogue is "I am your father."
Yeah,
That's
but
the one
in
every young
commercial
man.
sense, that must be like your point of view in that way. But even those who haven't seen Star Wars know Darth Vader. How many other characters would they identify with? You can take a survey, and you'll be like, I think Darth Vader is the most famous character. I think he's even crossed Spock from Star Trek. Even if you look at it in a holistic way, I think Darth Vader is, at least for the sci-fi genre, the most prominent, most popular figure there is, character there is.
Yeah, there's probably also another reason why I and most of the people I knew were so into the Darth Vader character, and this is just a full disclosure for me and Shaji. When he's in London, we both live in an area where the actor who played Darth Vader also lived. In fact, I actually know where his house is. I've even been there. I knew him quite well, David Prowse. He's passed away, unfortunately, now, a few years ago, but he's actually from our area. So maybe that also influenced why pretty much every kid in the playground back then wanted to be Darth Vader because he was a local hero. Maybe that's the reason why. I don't know, but I do know that
No, but Rafi,
popularity
even like
also is
for
beyond the world.
example,
Uh,
of course,
no,
just
actually,
once.
Shaji, if you don't mind. Okay. No, actually, you see, I was thinking about the same thing just about now that not many character of Star Trek were famous, even though their salute was famous. But I mean, people don't exactly know them. They can recognize them, they don't know them. Unlike Yoda and Darth Vader, like even in the Desi community, they know who they are, even though they won't watch the movies. Most of them haven't watched the movies. They just know who they are. So Darth Vader, yes, he was. I think he made history. Dude made history.
Maybe that's
So
also
so
psychological.
but
Sorry,
Rafi,
sorry, Sukhan. Just maybe that's also psychological. If you look back in history, we do tend to be fascinated by the bad guys. I mean, going back, why is it everyone knows the character Frankenstein, but do they know what the so-called hero's full name is? Because I can't remember.
I don't even know.
Right,
Yeah,
Baron Frankenstein's actual first name. No one knows that, but we know about Frankenstein's monster. When it comes to
I would
vampire,
also.
everyone's heard of Dracula, but who's heard of the vampire
It's going to.
Slayer, that Dracula's nemesis, if you will?
Everybody,
Yeah, Van
Who is
Helsing.
Van Helsing? Yeah, but
everybody knows about.
compared
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Van
but
compared to
Helsing,
Dracula,
right.
in all fairness,
com-
that
I
came out
entirely forgot
years
the guy.
later. That came out
yeah,
years later
10
to
years
get his
later.
own
But
movie.
even if you asked today, did a survey, more people will be able to name Dracula than Van Helsing.
100%.
It's maybe it's psychological, but for some reason, people are fascinated by the macabre and the
I
dark
think
side and the
it's.
villains.
No, but it also, the problem
Okay.
is also because the way Darth Vader was presented, like he's this dark, tall guy, and then there is this breathing. The nobody knows what's like inside the helmet after later on. So it's kind of fascinating. It's a mysterious character. We don't know what it is. We don't know what happened. But there is this guy who's like super tall and wear a black outfit, all over the place, and just have this really distinct breathing style. So I think that kind of gave him this attention.
Yeah,
By the
and
way,
basically
guys,
trash everything.
I
Yeah,
I think we have been very bad hosts. There was a question posed in the comments by
it was.
Kala,
Oh,
and I
right.
think we should answer that as well. We should involve audience as well. And the question is, do you guys think sci-fi movies has anything to do
Yeah,
with
that's a whole
motivating?
section. So we're going to come back to that. That's a whole section which is going
Oh,
to be covered by Tatiana.
But
oh, okay, okay.
I do appreciate the caretaking of people's questions, and at least Gala can know that we're getting to their question. Um, so good shout. And I think Shachi, you had something you wanted to
Yeah.
say?
So what I was basically saying, first going back to what Rafi basically said, like if you look at it, even though he might have been a local hero, but even if you look around, like uh, everywhere, I think not many characters from Star Wars, especially not from like those avid, if we leave apart the hardcore followers of Star Wars, they would know many other characters apart from Yoda, and basically Darth Vader is the most popular. But secondly, when Maham says that uh, Star Wars characters are more known than Star Trek characters, I would disagree. I think that's a recent phenomenon. Otherwise, the most popular, all the way up till 2003, 2004, the most popular character was Spock from Star Trek. And everyone wanted to be him with those freaky ears and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Like even today, I would say like not as popular as he that character was. But compared to Darth Vader, after Darth Vader and Yoda, I think the third most famous character or well-known character from the sci-fi genre is still Spock. I don't know like
So,
what.
okay, Shaji, I want to point something out to you. You're talking from the concept of someone who was raised in London, but I'm talking about someone who have lived in this Desi community, and I'm saying this because most of the people here, they haven't watched a Star Trek and they haven't watched Star Wars. Okay? But I can still actually show you people who have no idea what these two movies mean, but they can point Darth Vader to you. They can point Yoda to you, right? So it automatically, if it have reached the Desi community, right? So that automatically means it's more famous. I mean, from that time, I mean, when you talk about it.
No, I would agree. Right now it is, but if you look at
No,
90s,
Shaji. Back when, even when I was younger, it was Darth Vader and Yoda. I knew the
no, no,
character, but I
that must
haven't
have
watched
been
the
before.
movies.
That can't be in the 90s, right? In the late
I was
90s,
pretty young.
Star Wars.
I'm a 90s
Late,
kid.
yeah, I know, but 90s Star Wars was not even released yet, re-released. It
Yeah,
didn't
but
become popular. And on top of that, there's another thing. PTV used to show Star Trek series, The Next Generation. So all the kids
that's
on that's before, like, I understand, like, you haven't seen it, but if you look at
no. I'm
like
just saying. I'm just saying that I'm pretty sure people can point out that this is like, they can, if you show them the character, they would be able to point
now
it
they
out to
can,
you.
yeah.
No, I'm talking about Star Trek. They can, but I have never in all my life heard anyone mention any of the Trek character or even the series. I've only heard it from one person, and that person lives in US. Other than
Yeah,
that,
and
it's
and and I agree with you, because right now this is a dead period post Star Trek, like there was a dead period post Star Wars for a good 20, 30 years. So most of the people you're going to find who know about Star Trek characters are not going to be general public. But if you go to people who are like mid 30s and above, they'll know each and every character of Star Trek.
Shaji. Trust me, that's not the case in Desi
Okay, I
community.
think
Trust me.
we're devolving into like just a difference of opinion that is unprovable, and yeah, I mean, I do
No,
think
actually, strange enough, they're both correct, but from a different perspective. What Sir Glenn's saying is true if you happen to be in the English speaking world and you are an avid watcher of television, because that's where most people know Star Trek. The movies, strangely enough, were not that successful. They were commercially successful, but not huge. Maham is correct because actually Star Wars was a global cinematic phenomenon that went beyond just the English speaking world. Yeah, Star Trek hasn't really been shown in non-English speaking countries, or where it has, it's been subtitled. It hasn't been like translated audio translation. It is very much limited to the English speaking world. Star Wars isn't. It's a global thing. Yeah, people in China who never heard of Star Trek, never seen it, but they'll know about Star Wars, and chances are they'll have seen a movie or two. So it's just because it was more popular.
if I may, I think it's also that Star Wars benefited from the continuity of Darth Vader over several long, intense, like draw you in movies, whereas on Star Trek they tended to the bad guys were changing a lot, because they were trying to show us different cultures, and that was one of the great things about Star Trek, is that it was very sort of almost modern space anthropology, if you will, because they showed us so many different modes of living and philosophies for how to live one's life. But I think Darth Vader had the continuity, and yes, as Maha mentioned, definitely the imposing character, the voice that everybody loved to do. He was just incredibly distinctive.
Correct. I completely agree with that.
I love you for being such a great tiebreaker that we're all right. You should.
No, strange enough, they both were right. They both were right, but for different reasons.
Indeed. Well, thank you for coming in and moderating that bit. So, fan culture and its evolution. How has Star Wars fan culture evolved, and what defines its passionate and diverse fan base? And I would actually
Star
like to
Wars fan
layer,
base.
I was going to layer one other
Okay,
thing
go.
into this, because if anyone feels comfortable speaking to, and you don't have to, I'm wondering what your thoughts are in how the Star Wars fan base has responded to sort of cultural shifts and polarization as well. But I might be overcomplicating, so that's fine. I do that. I over-engineer things. So, how has the fan culture evolved, and what defines its passionate and diverse fan base? Maham.
Um, Actually, Star Wars fan base is pretty famous for being very toxic. Oh my God, because I have read so many fights among them, and they would fight so hard. Oh my God. And most of them just hate Disney. They hate Disney for doing what they did, and they like hate watch it. Like they want to watch it, but they hate watch it. And they're like, what does it do to Star Wars? And it's so interesting to just watch them from outside, and them fighting with each other on Quora, on Reddit, even on Facebook. And yeah, I mean, Star Wars, I didn't follow any other fan base because I was not really interested. But Star Wars fan base, it's very toxic. There's a lot of cancellation going on over there.
What do you think makes it toxic?
They're just
Why is it
very
toxic?
you can say they're very passionate about it. They're really, I mean, that's the thing. I think that's the thing about Star Wars. Initially, two movies, they're boring, they're okay, you just watch it, and then you just join Clone Wars, and then you're like, okay, wow, then you get attached, and then you read about it, and then I guess that is why they have so much stuff going on. They have comics, they have books, they have the canon version, and they have this legend version, and just so much going on. And then all these people, they fight about it like it's a real thing. I mean, you just read them, and you be like, wow, these people are fighting, like they're fighting for their, usually people fight for their political leaders, the party they want to vote to, the Democrats are better, the Republicans are better, and the same way they fight for each other. If the Mandalorians were bad, or the Jedis were like this, and who was a bad character, and what did they do to that movie, and they discuss. It's really interesting, actually, when you read about them. And I got most of my stuff from those comments.
And so what other, yeah, I hear what you're saying about the where the toxicity sort of comes from. And I wonder to some degree, actually, I'm curious for people's experiences, especially for those of you who've been Star Wars from the beginning. Have you noticed a shift in the toxicity of the culture? And do you think that it mirrors a shift in the toxicity of our public discourse, and like the lack of sort of decorum that we have in arguments, that or the polarization, atomization that society has been experiencing? So do you feel like there's been a ramp up of toxicity, and did the digital sphere potentiate that?
Actually, surprisingly, the toxicity in Star Wars fan clubs is more these days is more directed towards Disney rather than each other. Like they're fine with either discussing it with each other, maybe, but it's more directed towards Disney. So when you read about their comments about Disney, because I grew up loving Disney, watching all those movies and stuff. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it kind of rubbed off of me. And now I feel like, okay, Disney, why did they do that? But I'm not as toxic as all these people, fighting for their life. What did they do? Why did they have to do this? And they especially hate Rey Skywalker. They think the character is just not worth it. And I guess the toxicity is on a level where, so Anakin Skywalker actor, something Christensen, I forgot his first name. Sid, do you remember his first name? Hayden Christensen. So they bullied the guy so much because the prequel was not very, very famous with the fans. They bullied the guy so much that he stopped acting for a long while. He just went like, you know what, I'm not acting anymore. Even though his character became like universe global, and it's no, Anakin Skywalker, everybody like remembers his name and everything. But the guy literally, yeah, he just decided to shift back to his farm or something, and he was like, you know what, I can't take this, I cannot move on with this. So that's the kind of uh, the fans have generally accepted prequel. They're like, you know what, it's fine. But the recent ones, they just flip and hate it. Maybe in 10 years, they'll come around to this too. I don't know.
So Any other comments on the fan base or how the fan base is? Maybe I see you, Rafi, unmuting. Go on.
Yeah, I have to look at this from the perspective of my generation.
Hmm.
For us, it was completely a revolutionary thing. It just it broadened everything we believed in. I mean, it was generally accepted that the Force existed. If you were of that generation, you know, everyone wanted to be a Jedi. Well, actually, everyone wanted to be Darth Vader, but you know, sort of the same thing. As for why the fan base has become so toxic, I suppose that's just because, well, pretty much everything's toxic these days online, but it's also because people feel they own Star Wars for some reason.
Mm.
It's the passion comes from the fact that it's their own little world, and therefore anyone who has a slightly different perspective on that world has to be wrong. And how is it evolved is actually fascinating, but I've no idea. But it's fascinating to see how it's evolved, the fan base, because it just doesn't make much sense to me personally.
I can see how, because everyone takes a piece of art that they love and like interpolates it into themselves, right? So there's, you know, life is all projection and your perspective defines reality. So if you're seeing yourself in things and making things make sense for you, I could see how if it's something you love a lot, someone else having a slightly different nuanced perspective on that feels almost like an existential threat to your sense making because it's something you identify with so much. And to Maham's point, it just becomes this bitter like fight to the death of no, but it's this and this is what was meant by it because they're so invested in that story because it's become part of their own narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's right that Disney has kind of ruined it a bit. It has kind of ruined it a bit, but
I
apparently
also want
they've
to
learned the lessons.
I also want to add one thing that I've noticed generally because when I watch seasons, when you watch a movie, just one episode, you don't grow attached to it, right? You just watch it, and then you watch a season. You watch Friends or you watch Shameless, and you grow attached to it, right? And by the time they end, you're like, okay, you have to start another season to, fill that void in your heart that it left behind. So I think when it comes to Star Wars, now this series is happening for what 50 years, and there is so much to watch. I mean, you begin with the two movies, and then you go to the Clone Wars season, and then you come back and you watch the next movie, The Revenge of the Sith, and then you watch, and then the Revenge of the Sith have three different ending in three different seasons. So you have this view from all of these seasons. Like there is this season from the Bad Batch. They show it from their perspective, and then there is this. You watch it from the Revenge of the Sith, and all of these things when you so, and then it goes into different directions, right? And then there is so much available. Like you have these comics, you have these books, and you can read up on it. Lucas did not just make a movie; he just made a whole universe. So eventually, you got so attached to it that I don't know. Maybe just people just don't want to let go. I guess it will be just sometime I think about what's going to be the end of Star Wars. At some point they're going to tell us that it ended, and that would be really, that would break my heart, honestly. So imagine the toxic people; they just start screaming and crying about it. You get attached to seasons, and that's just exactly what happened to these people, most of them.
Indeed. I can definitely see that. And I've seen those fan bases. Sid, I know you wanted to say something. Please, my love, go right ahead.
Yeah, Rafi Bhai said a little bit of a thing which sparked my interest. That for some reason the people think we own Star Wars. That there is a reason for that. I remember a time when celebrities were not gods. They were as human as
Mm.
we are. And they made things for us. And we felt like, and they wanted us to own them, these things. And we owned them and we loved them. And they became a part of us. That's why people get offended. People assume, well, not assume, right now it's our reality. We do not own Star Wars anymore. Disney does. There was a time when it was not the propriety of Disney, it was to the people. All art was for the people. Frankenstein was for the people. And if anybody would try to change anything, we were like, you can't do that. You need complete public opinion to shift in your favor if you want to do that. It's not your property. Yes, you have written it, but since you have written it, it does not belong to you because you wrote it for us. It's ours. Dragon Ball Z was ours. You can't kill Goku. I mean, nobody can kill Goku. Well, nobody could have killed Goku. Right now, I'm not even sure. The reason being, celebrities are not human anymore. They're gods. What do we do about that now?
That is definitely an interesting point. Like, in the intensity and acceleration of like parasocial relationships that people have with influencers or YouTubers or celebrities, it it is an ownership thing, and it is very objectifying in being an ownership thing versus something that is that like you're grateful for or you can appreciate the person's art. Yeah, and that is a very new and digitally driven development. I mean, maybe not very new. Sorry, I think I'm sure it existed before, but not to the sort of hyper intensity that it does now.
But that's because, Tatiana, most of the people wants to get away from reality, and that is why they get involved in such things.
You are not wrong. And, you know, reality is accelerating into entropy, and most people are very uncomfortable with the change that that might bring. So we're, I think, ever more, there's a subsection of the population that is clinging to fantasy because it is the only thing that feels stable. Because our world is not stable and it's becoming less stable by the day for any number of reasons. So I can see that that's a strong cohort and inspiration. And it makes sense psychologically. Like, how could you not have empathy for it? You might wish that people did differently, but that is the truth of the human condition. Um, so, influence on subsequent generations. How has Star Wars influenced subsequent generations of creators and shaped sci-fi in its wake?
Okay. So
Oh, this is the
I
question you've been waiting for. I say, go on.
yeah, I'm not really waiting for, but like this is something which I came across pretty recently. There was an article which I read, and then that made me led me to dig a bit further. So when it comes to Star Trek, majority of the kind of implications it's had is on development of gadgets. There are various gadgets and tech things which you can see. But if you look at Star Wars, it has not inspired scientists to the same extent, but it's inspired creative and movie development. So the tech it's had influence on are the creators, apart from a few things. So I think different things, if again, when you look at Star Trek, what you'll see is like different gadgets kind of being emphasized. It's not that it was a greater genius, but that kind of stuck with the engineers and a few developers. In Star Wars case, it inspired the creators to basically develop tech in relation to videography and other stuff. So that's one impact. In terms of space exploration, again, I think that's more that can be debated. Which movie basically had more in regards to that. But again, there's another impact because both of these movies initially became a phenomena in the 60s and the 70s, where this whole thing, another thing was going on at the time. And again, you can see that it also had an influence in those regards, and that was basically the whole New Age movement, and how a particular kind of a group basically got into that, and that almost built, in my opinion, a bridge between the tech and social movements. Again, I think these movies have had great impact on in those respects, where it's gone and been consumed by the audience as well as developers to go and produce things which might not have even existed. So in terms of tech, in terms of exploration, in terms of communication, in creativity, all these things have had great effects.
I want to ask Shaji a question, Tatiana, if that's okay.
By all means.
Shaji, there is this part of Star Wars story where there is this community out of the galaxy called the Yuuzhan Wong, something I forgot his name. But now that community is specifically very anti-tech. Okay, that community is more based on the bio, natural side of the stuff. Or even their spaceship are made out of wood and they're alive, right? Do you think the vegan movement was motivated from that?
I think when the vegans came into like prominence, that obviously that also made the plot must have. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it, but might be the case in terms of amplification. But surely there are other things. Again, I'd like to add Star Wars is very famous amongst protesters as well. So again, a lot of inspiration is from there, and we hear a lot of Star Wars quotes in major protests, and people were part and parcel of whether it's the vegan movement against wars,
May the force be with you.
other stuff as well, loads of other stuff. The references are there. I've seen you make many references in serious conversations in
Yeah,
regards.
because I'm a big
So
fan,
there,
of course.
but in Star Trek's case, that's not the case. Another thing, another person we're talking about sci-fi after all, like even though it's more centered around Star Wars. L. Ron Hubbard, he started an entire religion out of sci-fi.
Yeah.
He was originally a
Mhm.
sci-fi writer, Scientology.
The Anunnakis, technically, the Anunnakis were also some beings from the moon who were gods. They are considered gods, and they're still controlling Earth from the moon. And then there is these cults of Cthulhu. So Cthulhu is a creature that came from outer space. It's an alien creature that came from outer space and is sleeping under Earth, and it's a very dangerous creature according to the cults. So yeah, they have these cults as well, the Cthulhu cults. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I would like Rafiba's take on this as well in terms of Scientology and how L. Ron Hubbard might have been an indirect instigator of both Star Wars, Star Trek, and maybe Doom too. No, I don't know. Maybe.
No, you're going on a tangent there. No,
Well, I'm
L1 Hubbard had
instigating you.
nothing to
Trust
do with
me
it.
on that. I'm instigating you.
Had nothing whatsoever to do with that. And no, he didn't actually. Well, I'm sure L1 Hubbard would take credit for starting Scientology, but he didn't actually invent it. It was invented by his mentor, erstwhile mentor, Aleister Crowley, who invented it as a practical joke on L. Ron Hubbard. But the practical joke backfired because L. Ron Hubbard's religion became a worldwide phenomenon, and Aleister Crowley's religion is practiced by about 20 odd people around the world. So that's a whole another different story. As far as Star Wars is concerned, its legacy on what has it been? it's been largely down to the way in which certainly space sci-fi has been presented ever since Star Wars first came out. Visually, it was revolutionary in terms of how it was presented on screen. No one had seen anything like that before. As good as Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey was, and it is an absolute classic, and it is essentially where the iPad and the iPhone were first invented. I have to get that in there. Visually, it wasn't as stunning as Star Wars when it first came out. And ever since Star Wars first came out, its greatest legacy is the way in which subsequent space sci-fi movies or series on TV have looked and felt has been very much influenced by the way Star Wars was made. The audio-visual impact of it. Even a lot of the aliens that you might see in other series, there's a hell of a lot of similarity to the creatures you see in Star Wars and first see in Star Wars. You look at the way aliens were presented before Star Wars, they didn't look very alien. You know, take Star Trek, for example. The way the Klingons were presented and looked in the original series in the 1960s, they looked human. After Star Wars, from the Next Generation onwards, Star Trek, in the 90s, the Klingons looked alien. And that concept of making aliens look alien, non-human, that started with Star Wars. And it gave rise to the idea that, okay, other alien beings don't necessarily have to look like us. Whereas before, everyone thought an alien was basically 2 arms, 2 legs, looked pretty human. This is where Star Wars' greatest legacy lies, is in how space sci-fi has been presented ever since. In terms of its impact on society in general, but then that's a lot to do with what Star Wars is about. It's about good guys, bad guys, and the good guys are the rebels, not the established order, the rebels. The established order, the government, are the bad guys. Hence, protest movements do like to quote and see Star Wars as a kind of perhaps not conscious but unconscious inspiration. Well, if the Jedi can do it, if the rebels can do it, then so can we. And they like to quote that. That is definitely an impact on society. The underdogs can win because George Lucas says they can win.
Beautiful, thank you. Maham, I believe you wanted to feed in.
So I wanted to point something out. I think the thing about Star Wars that it's more attractive is because Star Wars is not just technology. You see a lot of magical shit going on there. It's not just alien, like you have this force and you have these prophecies and they're dressed like samurais, and you do not expect such thing from a science fiction movie. I mean, from a movie about tech and science fiction, you expect people dressed more sleek in one color. That's what most of the movies told us, that that in future it's going to be like just one color and very sleek and very same color, in which either white or black. And then Star Wars, on the other hand, is like, it has this magical stuff going on, and it has this science and tech. The same side, you have swords, you have laser swords, and then you have laser guns, right? You have these spaceships, right? And then you have people who like float because they can control the force. You have the witches of Dathomir, and because Jedi and Sith, they are essentially religions, right? There is a Jedi religion, and then there is a Sith religion, right? And then all these things, like I said, is just so relatable. But then there is this one thing that I find very ironic now that Rafi talked about the whole protest thing. In the start of the movie, there is this galactic republic, and then there is the opposite party is a separatist movement. But at that point, the separatist movement is kind of shown as an enemy when you actually go to the backstory of it. Now there's the backstory of it, of Count Dooku, where he sees all these, even though the separatism is inspired by the Palpatine, but Count Dooku was inspired by all the bad stuff that is that the Galactic Republic is doing, right? And there is these small videos, I forgot his name, but yeah, the origin stories in that it's mentioned. So a lot of those people who were on the other side, they were inspired, like uh, what was that guy's name who used to fight Obi-Wan all the time? General something. I forgot his name. Do you remember his name, Sid? Who was like completely machine.
Grievous, General Grievous.
So General Grievous' whole planet was destroyed, right? So he was out to get revenge because his whole family was destroyed, and he had his reasons, right? You can just, when you look at General Grievous, you're like, okay, you hate the guy, especially with his love-hate relationship with Obi-Wan Kenobi. But he has a story, he has a backstory where he was hurt by this very republic, like Anakin, how did he land in slavery? And that's because of the Galactic Republic. There are multiple stories like this. I think same goes for the Dathomir witches. They also had some situation going on, and the Mandalorian have their own situation going on with the Jedi's and the Galactic Republic. So I mean, like I said, I mean, if you want to apply the move, if you want to be a hero, but you want to be supporting a dictator, you can definitely, you're in the government and you want to be the hero, you can definitely support the Galactic Republic and make the separatists look like villains, right? I'll give you a real life example. India, or maybe Pakistan, we have this separatist movement called Khalistanis and Balochistan movement, right? Now, if I want to see myself as a government, I would just be like, oh, look, Galactic Republic is on my side, but the separatists, Count Dooku and General Grievous, they're on the opposite side. They're the bad people, right? So I can just relate them to the Balochistan movement or Khalistan movement. But if I'm a part of the Balochistan movement or Khalistan movement, I would feel like, whoa, I am the rebel. We are the Luke Skywalker and the Princess Leia, and they're the Empire who are the bad people, right? But then I also wanted to add this point that there is this racist connotation to Star Wars as well, because there is this, in Star Wars Rebel, there are, in fact, in most of the series, if you watch it, there is this character, and he is a thief, right? He is a thief, and you would not believe this, that the moment they actually enter their place, there is actually Desi music playing there. So, but then there is this Akbar character in the rebel movement. So yeah, I mean, there is this kind of a little bit racism. Yes, I saw it there, but I can ignore it. I love the whole universe of Star Wars.
That is actually a perfect segue into our next question. Though, if anyone wants to feed into what Maham said, I also don't want to not give you space to do so. Would anyone like to comment before I move into the next question?
Not comment per se, just to add to it. You need to bear in mind that the first 6 movies of Star Wars, I mean, they did pander to Hollywood executives. Bad guys had to look bad. And back in the day, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, bad guys were generally believed to have darker skin tones. So you find that most of the villains tended to have darker skin tones because that's what Hollywood executives wanted. You also found that women tended to be helpless damsels who just basically screamed a lot, except for Leia. That's what made her so popular, is that she broke the mold, that character. Broke the mold. And it wasn't until basically 2016, 2017, when you had the character of Daisy Ridley's character, Rey, that you actually had a woman who kind of behaved like a human being. Whereas before, they didn't, because Hollywood executives didn't want them to. So you do have to sort of say, yeah, there is a racist element, there is a kind of xenophobic element, there is a kind of misogynistic element, but then that's what Hollywood was, and to a large extent still is. And you can't make a movie in Hollywood unless the executives are happy with you. So you do have to compromise a bit.
Indeed, and like it fits into their typecast of like this certain character. Yeah, they've got whole character sheets of like the slots and boxes that people have to fit into that robs them of their dimensionality and humanness and brings them
Yeah,
down to these one note elements of who they are.
that's the biggest criticism of Hollywood. It
Well,
always has been.
and they're just that everything is formulaic. The characters, the
Yes.
plot lines, it's just unimaginative pap, right? But yeah. Anyway, sorry. But this again, thank you for feeding in because again, great segue to the next question. Since we started talking about some of it, if we could delve a little bit more deeply into excuse me, the challenges or criticisms that Star Wars has faced and how they've impacted the franchise. So we've definitely, yeah, the racism, the sexism, and that also is just a reflection of the culture. But what other criticisms has it faced? Or challenges did they face, in the public sphere?
Actually, I'm not so sure they faced that many criticisms until Disney took over.
And what year was
Once
that? Just to be clear.
2015, 2016.
Interesting. Go on, please.
Yeah. Until then, there weren't that many criticisms. It was you just took it for what it was. Once Disney took over, I don't know why, but that's when the criticisms and challenges started facing. One of the things I would say about Disney, as far as the series that they're making, Disney are making the Star Wars things that Disney wants to make. They're not really making the stuff that the fans would like them to make. And that may not be a good idea by Disney, but that's Disney's own commercial problem. But that's where the criticisms began, especially with the last 3 movies that were made. Especially the last one was really hated by a lot of hardcore fans because they thought it was such a disappointment. I personally thought it was okay, but I can see why many hardcore fans hated it, because the Disney executives did chop the story a lot and they did interfere with it. So it was almost like they did it in a hurry, and it's not as good as it could have been.
Can we also speak to the backlash that Disney faced in trying to diversify Star Wars? Because while Disney probably did a lot of awful things that took the spirit and the edge out of, be it the storyline or the intention or the overarching philosophies that were being presented, people would say that, at least they tried to diversify the galaxy far, far away. And there was, I'm not even somebody who, I don't even watch TV, I don't watch the news, but I read the news elsewhere better than the TV news. But I remember hearing about just the enormous and vicious backlash against that person can't be black, that character can't be this color, and it was just stupefying to me that people were getting so riled up about it. So, any thoughts on that from anyone? I'm curious.
I think
Sid,
Yes,
that's
but
my
it
valid
might
time.
sound a bit
let
controversial.
go ahead,
Yes,
Sid,
sir.
and then we'll come to
Sorry,
you,
Sid.
Rafi.
Yeah,
No, you're fine.
go ahead,
Oh,
Sid.
so my, yeah, I think the recent in recent times how Hollywood has been trying to push diversity. There are some things that come naturally. I mean, let's talk about Princess Leia. The way she was presented, it was subliminal, and the way that her character, which was out of her place in that particular time, but it was accepted because it was shown, I should say, in a questioning way or in a reactive way, reactive to the storyline in itself. It was not taking the real world and putting it into the fiction. It was creating the fiction in response to the real world and making the character respond to the fictional world. It was not making the character respond to the real world. When you are trying, I mean, for example, there has been also backlash in regards to the mermaid, Ariel the mermaid. They turned her black. They could very well have a mermaid named, let's say, one of her sisters, and make a story about her, and she just happens to be black. But they would not do it. They would. It was forcing diversity where it was not supposed to be. I remember black superhero characters. Green Lantern existed, Static Shock existed. But what they want, and I think they learned a lot of things with Miles Morales. They made a new Spider-Man character that happened to be black, and that's why it did not have that kind of backlash. But when it comes to Star Wars, they are trying to push ideas which actually do not belong to that universe. You can very well make that universe have the real world problems be created and the characters react towards those things in the way that the directors or the Hollywood producers want them to react, but to destroy already established characters or destroying already established worlds and just making no sense out of it. Out of the blues, everything is just the way it is. But what happened to it? Like, what happened to the whole history about it?
I
And I
totally
think that's the backlash.
I hear what you're saying about, like people have an established character in their minds that they're interacting with, but somebody could offer the feedback that, well, maybe this is Star Wars setting right the wrongs of earlier times in not being more inclusive because society wasn't more inclusive. And, so there's also that perspective to it, is there not?
Yes, there
I
is.
wouldn't agree because Rafiman.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Rafi.
yes, there is that perspective. But Sid is correct in when he says that a lot of the criticism that Disney received was because they changed existing characters. Whereas what they should have done was introduce brand new characters of different that diversity through brand new characters rather than change the existing ones. Because once the existing ones are created, they become beloved, and you don't want them to change.
Of
You
course.
know, they look the way they look. So you want to change it, bring a new character. That would have been better. But also a lot of the criticism that Disney received was because of when they did this, not so much how. Remember, Disney took over at the same time that Trump was rising. And when they forced this diversity, they went about in a cack-handed way. But there's a time when their main audience in America really wanted to have a backlash against diversity. So a lot of the criticism was almost kind of obvious that it was going to happen because that was the environment at the time.
Mm.
Interestingly, they receive a lot less criticism now than they did, say, 4 years ago for doing the same things.
Hmm.
And they're still doing it around in a cack-handed way, which is, again, my criticism for Disney.
I
Well,
would like to add something to it. So the thing is
mm,
that even though there is this small racist connotation going on, um, it gets away with it. I have not one person like I searched out the name. I forgot the name of the character. Honda Onaka. Even though his name sounds Chinese, Japanese, he's a pirate, and usually the bar he sits in have in the background there is a desi music run. Desi kind of music. Even though recently they gave us this small clip of what was it, Shaji, the thieves of something, which was more in the placed in Desi culture with Jedi's from Desi culture and stuff. But I guess I don't know how, but they kind of do get away with it. But it's just like like I said, that even though I see the racism there, but I'm fine with it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll just finish this. So that's
Yeah,
that's the thing. But then again, Mace Windu is one of the strongest Jedi in the universe. So it's kind of you're sometimes like, okay, so on one side it's kind of getting racist, on the other side they're not racist at all. So it's kind of confusing. Like the series is kind of bipolar.
I
yeah. As
think
I said, when
it was.
Star Wars does it right, it works brilliantly well. Mace Windu was a brand new character that turned up in Phantom Menace. There was no existing Mace Windu. As a result,
Yeah.
because they made it using a black character, Samuel Jackson, a fantastic actor, it worked because it's a brand new character. No one knew what to expect. So that's when it works. It's when you change an existing character, that's
Hmm.
when people get really upset.
well, certainly,
But
Like
because
what
there's
Disney is doing to the princesses from our childhood.
essentially, yeah,
there's a
Yeah.
hagiography around characters that people are familiar with, and they're very personally
yeah.
invested. That said, this has been a scintillating conversation. I had no idea it would get so deep and dynamic around Star Wars, but we are at the 2 hour mark, and I would like to thank all of our amazing guests for joining us and all of our audience for joining us and spending time with us. I hope you found it as engaging and fascinating as I know I did. Um, and Shatu, would you like to just close it out and say goodbye to everyone?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much for joining. I think Maham will close off the stream. Thanks a lot, Tatiana. I would like to thank you and Rafi Bhai. If anyone else other than Maham basically has a final comment to make, go ahead and make that, and then I'll pass the microphone on to Maham, and we can close. If there's somebody, just unmute yourself. But yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead, Sid.
I was just going to say that I'm personally offended in that in all of this discussion, we were not able to put in the character that I hate the most in Star Wars, which is Jar Jar Binks. Yeah,
What do you mean? He's
Yes,
everybody's favorite. I
we
don't know
I
what
agree.
you're talking
love that
about.
Even
character.
Sith actually said there is a famous belief that he was secretly a Sith.
most probably, but I think that that was like just the worst character. And I mean, not portrayed wise, like as a personality, I would not like such a person in my friend group.
Okay,
Yeah.
Rafiba, your final comments. What was your take?
I'd just like to say that this has been a novel experience for me, and actually, surprisingly, enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I
Oh,
thought I
you,
would. So,
I'm,
Count
How
me in
about
for
Furkan?
count me in for
Furkan?
another one.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We're going to pull you in for all of the ones which we're doing with you because
Furkan
we
Bhai
want
must be
to.
calling us geeks secretly.
No, that I started off the conversation with, but yeah, it was interesting, and I think we should also do certain other rooms on people who have a thing for the comic world. So I think that would be more interesting and more relevant as compared to Star Wars, I guess.
Furkan Bhai, we
Yeah,
will bring
we
Sorry,
can.
comics to
I
Star.
have been pulling.
We will bring Star Wars to comics as well. Don't worry about it.
Okay, okay, and it
And
was a
there's another
wonderful
thing we
discussion,
can.
I guess.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we can find a bit of space for like Marvels as well. Tatiana, what was your experience like, and what do you? What you should have an opinion on exactly what was spoken about, and what's your opinion on that as well?
I find it so I'm really into philosophy and human sense making. And I love the beauty of watching people find meaning in metaphor that makes sense for them, even that like another person would not necessarily see, and personalize things. Um, because I don't remember who it was, and I feel like I'm going to do you a disservice by not doing so. Was it Dr. Ahmed who said we are pattern recognition machines? Maybe it was Sid. We are pattern recognition brains, and finding just watching people's minds play with this thing that they love and sift through it is just a lovely experience for me because I find different people's minds fascinating and like their different perspectives on the world, and what they see in art is hugely reciprocal about what they see in themselves. So what you attach to in a movie or a piece of fiction or whatever says just as much about you as you think you're saying about it, and it's fascinating for me always to watch. So
Yeah,
thank you all
thank
for
you.
having me along. This is lovely.
Definitely, you most welcome. Maham, I'm just going to go towards you. Just go for the close.
Yeah, I guess all I'm going to say is, Sid, have you? I don't think you know the ending of Jar Jar Binks. He ends really badly, and a lot of people actually claim that he was secretly a Sith, so he gave all the powers to the Chancellor. That's all I'm going to say because I've talked a lot in this session. Subscribe the channel. Thank you for
And
listening to
beautifully.
us. Subscribe to the
Uh,
channel. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for joining us. And press the bell button so that you can get regular updates regarding Star Wars, politics, religion, history, and maybe someday we'll make a session about Marvels too if we feel bad enough, I guess.
Or Star
Maham,
Trek.
before you
But
end the
yeah,
stream, I
okay.
just want
See you guys
to.
later.
Don't
Goodbye. Have a nice day. Yeah, start.
I just wanted to say before you end the stream that it gives me peace that Jar Jar Binks ends badly.
And just last comment, the stream should end with the phrase "May the force be with you."
May the
May the
force
force
be with you.
be with
Oh, that was a
you.
good one. May the force be with you.